People on the left seem to think that when Joe Biden keeps his promises, it makes him more popular. What if when Joe Biden keeps his promises, it makes him less popular because his promises suck? How about that? New polling shows, according to NBC News, that more people oppose the vaccine mandates than favor the vaccine mandates. I said this all along. I said that the early polling that showed that vaccine mandates were popular, that was because a lot of the people who were in favor of vaccine mandates were already vaccinated. But then it dawned on them, wait a second, if there are vaccine mandates, I might have to get a booster. Maybe I don't want to get a booster. If there are vaccine mandates, what if that means there's no stuff on the shelves of the store where I want to buy things? What if it means that I call 911 and no cop shows up? So now, 47% favor the vaccine mandates, 50% oppose. But here's the more important stat. Only 34% of Americans strongly favor a vaccine mandate, as opposed to 41% who strongly oppose the vaccine mandate. Remember when I said that the only people who are passionate about these issues are the people who oppose? Correct. Okay, so Joe Biden seems to make the common mistake of looking at poll numbers and believing that because people say they like a thing, it's a high priority for them. And that is not the same thing at all. Speaking of things where people say that they are interested in it, but they're really not interested in it, this brings us to Joe Biden and the climate conference, which we're supposed to all pretend is super important, even though China and Russia are not there, and China is the world's leading emitter. COP26, the United Nations, the Mos Eisley of international politics, a wretched hive of scum and villainy. According to the Wall Street Journal, President Biden told world leaders at the COP26 summit that the coming decade would be decisive in the fight against climate change. Wow. Wow. He said it would be decisive? Incredible. I mean, I'm stunned by the amount of bravery that took. Stunning bravery with brave stunningness. Hours later, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi gave a slower than expected deadline for slashing his country's emissions, saying India would take as long as 2070 to reduce its net greenhouse gases to zero. Oh, you mean because they wish to develop and carbon is cheap? You mean that? Oh, oops. So Joe Biden's like, this is the decade that matters. We have to save the world. And then meanwhile in India, which is emitting at crazy rates, like, what if we just wait until 2070? What you gonna do about it, Joe? What you gonna do about it? The gap, according to the Wall Street Journal, highlights a fundamental divide between developing and developed nations, days after leaders of the group of 20 major economies made little progress, hammering out specific climate goals many had hoped would ease discussions in Scotland. Speaking to leaders and government officials from most of the world's nations, Mr. Biden warned that none of us can escape the worst that is yet to come. The doomsday cult that is the climate change movement is really crazy. We'll never escape. Really? We've escaped literally for all of human history. We have adapted, the human species, to changing climate. We are now better equipped to adapt to changing climate than at any time in human history, which is why climate deaths year on year continue to drop, even though the climate is indeed changing. But we have to pretend that the only way to prevent the bad effects of climate change is to prevent climate change itself by completely crippling the economy. And so we're just going to alarm you into doing. But my favorite thing is when Joe Biden is trying to alarm you into doing things by using extraordinarily purple language. And then when it comes down to what are you actually willing to do, Joe? He's like, well, we do need cheaper gas. Here was Joe Biden at COP26 explaining this is an existential threat to humanity. It is not an existential threat to humanity. Literally no one who is worth their salt in this area believes that climate change is going to wipe human beings off planet Earth. No one believes that. That's crazy talk. Here is Joe Biden engaging in some crazy talk that, again, because we live in a crazy era, is taken seriously.
Right now, we're still falling short. There's no more time to hang back or sit on the fence or argue amongst ourselves. This is the challenge of our collective lifetimes, the existential threat to human existence as we know it. And every day we delay, the cost of inaction increases. So let this be the moment that we answer history's call here in Glasgow.
Let this be the moment when we answer. Yeah, good luck with that. But, and then he says it's an inflection point in world history. All this bloviating. Honestly, the carbon emissions coming out of this dude's mouth are going to change the climate by a couple of degrees Celsius over the course of the next century.
Within the growing catastrophe, I believe there's an incredible opportunity, not just for the United States, but for all of us. We're standing at an inflection point in world history. We have the ability to invest in ourselves and build an equitable, clean energy future, and in the process, create millions of good-paying jobs and opportunities around the world.
Yeah, okay. If anybody believes, by the way, that the green energy sector is going to make up for the carbon sector right now, you are out of your mind. No one believes this. If that were the case, by the way, then the investment community would have already dumped money into this area to the extent that we would already be transforming. And in some areas we are, right? I mean, we already have Teslas, right? Like, electric cars are going to be a thing, but here's the thing. Cars are actually not the chief source of emissions when it comes to climate. Actual power plants are the chief source of emission when it comes to climate, and developing nations need those. And then Joe Biden went on to apologize for Donald Trump pulling out of the Paris Agreement as though the Paris Agreement meant anything. I do like John Kerry, the Easter Island head behind Joe Biden. The old white face of the anti-climate change movement is really always astonishingly inspiring.
I guess I shouldn't apologize, but I do apologize for the fact the United States, the last administration, pulled out of the Paris Accords and put us sort of behind the eight ball. The first thing I did when elected, I see my friend nodding his head over there because we talked about this before while I was running.
Yeah, put us back in the useless agreement that didn't do anything. Nobody kept to it, but I hate Trump, so, you know. Okay, so all this is so exciting and so necessary and so deeply moving. Joe Biden is so there for it. He is so on the mark. He is, like, if called upon, he will spring to his feet. He will answer the call. This is the inflection point. We have to prevent the catastrophe of a world boiling itself to death. Joe Biden fell asleep. Like, actually fell asleep in the middle of one of these climate change conferences. You can see him. There he is. Eyes start to close. And Joe Biden is gone. He is now sleeping in the middle of this conference. There he is. He is clearly out. He is clearly out cold. Like my baby in the backseat of the car on a long drive. Joe Biden is gone. He is just slow. In fact, Joe Biden had to be woken up by an aide to clap at the end of the speech. I am not kidding you. That is a thing that actually happened. Our doddering elderly again, the face of a decaying West is Joe Biden, a career politician who's never done a productive thing in his entire life, who is now the president of the United States, pledging to destroy the fundamental institutions of the West, ranging from family to free markets, in order to achieve a utopian vision that will never be achieved, but will maximize the power of old people like Joe Biden. Like that is, he's a pretty good metaphor. He is, just like as a human, he's just a good metaphor for what's happening right now. By the way, the same Joe Biden who is suggesting that we have reached the end, that it's all over, we've reached the end, he's seeking more oil production, according to the New York Times. Oops. Days earlier, according to the New York Times, he was urging the world's largest oil producers to pump more. The incongruity was on center stage, both at the Global Climate Summit, currently taking place in Scotland, and in Rome this past weekend, during a gathering of leaders from the 20 largest economies. According to the New York Times, the president's comments highlighted the political and economic realities facing politicians as they grapple with climate change. On the surface, it seems like an irony, said Biden, but the truth of the matter is, you've all known, everybody knows, the idea we're going to be able to move to renewable energy overnight was just not rational. You could let the pumping slow and raise the prices and let your constituents suffer. You could do that if you are Joe Biden. Well, you could do that, but then you'd bear the political brunt. He's not willing to do that, which is amazing for a guy who says we have to have the courage to move into a new tomorrow. Like, it's super important. Move into a new tomorrow. Meanwhile, by the way, the tech community is mobilizing on behalf of the propaganda as per our usual arrangement. According to the Washington Post, Twitter now says that they're going to attempt to combat climate disinformation by steering its massive user base to reliable information with more context, a strategy the company calls pre-bunking. Or you could go with just propagandizing. The rollout coincides with the UN COP26 Climate Summit in Glasgow, Scotland. By the way, that is not going to make people suspicious of the institutional powers that be at all. When you coordinate what information people can see, we'll probably believe you. Probably. We won't be suspicious at all that maybe this is part of a larger plan to reshape the institutions of the planet. Twitter users will be directed to online hubs containing credible, authoritative information, according to a company blog post. These guides will appear in users' Explore tabs, their Twitter search portals, and relevant trends lists, according to a Twitter spokesperson. The platform wants to get ahead of any coordinated falsehoods that could surface during the summit, which aims to chart an aggressive course to cut greenhouse gas emissions and slow Earth's warming. So the company spokesperson says they need reliable, authoritative hubs of information from global experts. Yeah, I'm sure that'll go well. Whenever you have our institutional betters telling you what you can and cannot see and how you ought to think about crucial issues that affect your life, that definitely fosters trust. The belief by all these people that the more they control your life, the more you trust them is totally crazy. But it is something that they continue to double down on over and over and over again on everything from education to climate change. Did you know that every single like creates one additional leftist tier? That is just science.